Zipper rolls out to the right, pitches off to Taylor, and Taylor's to the 20, down to the 15, down to the 10, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Touchdown, Billy Taylor! Touchdown, Billy Taylor! Billy Taylor scored a touchdown from 21 yards out. The crowd goes berserk. It was November 22nd, 1969. That they came to Berry, Michigan, all dressed in maize and blue. The words were said, the prayers were read, and everybody cried. But when they closed the coffin, there was someone else inside. Oh, they came to Berry, Michigan, but Michigan wasn't dead. And when the game was over, it was someone else instead. 11 Michigan Wolverines put on the gloves of gray, and as the organ played the victors, they laid Woody Hayes away. Under center is Wangler at the 45. He goes back. He's looking for a receiver. He throws downfield to Carter. Who's got it better than us? Nobody!
Welcome to the Michigan Man Podcast on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew, for Wolverine fans from coast to coast. Go Blue, and welcome to our game day edition of the show. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Michigan did their part against Northwestern on Saturday, and we know what's next. With us today to share his thoughts on the Northwestern win, and then look ahead to Saturday, is beat writer Aaron McMann from MLive. First, my view from Section 17 to get us started. If at any point in the preseason someone would have told you Michigan and Michigan State would be 7-0 when they met, you would have thought they were crazy. But here we are. The last time both teams were ranked in the top 10 when they met was 1964. The game was the third of the season, and it was played in East Lansing. We were number 7, the Spartans number 9, and it was a 17-10 Michigan win. These bitter rivals have never met this late in the season undefeated in the top 10 with so much on the line. The hype for this game will drive all of us nuts by midweek, I can guarantee you of that. We'll be ready to tee it up and just get it started. The game is going to be broadcast by Fox Sports, so their big noon pregame crew will be there, and ESPN Game Day will also go live from East Lansing, and I'm not sure that's ever happened before. If you grew up in this state, you know what it's like when these teams meet each year. In my opinion, it is the most intense state rivalry in all of college football. Now, some people will say, no, it's not. Alabama and Auburn is more intense, but I disagree with that. Roughly 80% of the state of Alabama pulls for the Crimson Tide. Auburn is truly the little brother down there. In our state, it's basically split down the middle. A true backyard brawl between friends and family, and it is intense and it gets nasty at times. We all know that. I'm not exaggerating when I say the stakes have never been higher in this series. The pressure is on Jim Harbaugh to get above 500 in this rivalry, and the loser of this game will be deflated. I guarantee you of that. Again, there is so much on the line. My guest today says he thinks this will end up being a one-possession game and could easily go down to the wire. I hope not, but I think he might be right. Joining us next is the fine beat writer from MLive, Aaron McMann, on this week's Game Day edition of The Michigan Man. So stay with us. Here with us on our Game Day segment this week is beat writer Aaron McMann from MLive. Great to have you back with us, Aaron.
Mike, it's good to be back. It's 7-0. We got a big game ahead, so I'm looking forward to talking about it.
It is a week of hype, the kind of which we have not seen in these parts unless you were alive and remember 1964. So we're going back there. But Michigan did their part on Saturday to set up this huge game in East Lansing, and we'll talk about that later. But let's just review Saturday's win over Northwestern. It was a really shaky first half for the offense, wasn't it?
Yeah, they were, it's tricky because they were productive because they were moving the football and they got in the red zone, I think, 3 times. They just seemed very, inefficient. They couldn't punch it in. I think those 3 red zone trips netted 1 touchdown. They had settled for a field goal and another one. They had that turnover, that fumble on the catch there by Mike Sanders still. So it was a very sloppy first half, which is very kind of uncharacteristic from this Michigan football team, at least this offense we've seen through, 6 weeks. They've largely been able to move the football and get punching in the end zone, which is kind of, the MO of the offense and why they're playing Cade McNamara. Part of it, I wonder if it was, Russ coming off the bye week. They just were, they looked a little sloppy at times, but they were able to kind of go into halftime, come out and on the other side, and then they looked a lot better. So, yeah, rusty to start, but they looked more like the team we expect them to be, there in the second half, I thought.
Yeah, and in the first half, they were running the football. They were moving the football. I know a lot of the fans, again, were saying, hey, why aren't we throwing? Well, Northwestern's one of the worst run defenses in college football, and we're one of the best running teams, so that's what you're going to do. The running game, again, was very, very good, wasn't it?
It was, and that's been a strength of this offense all season long. The Michigan coaching staff's done a very good job of, like you mentioned, with Western having one of the worst run defenses in the Big Ten in the country, of exploiting opposing defenses and where they're weak, and Michigan considers their run game a strength, and it very much is. So when they go up against these teams that, struggle running or, defending the run, they're going to do it. And I think they're going to continue to do it. And they leaned on, Blake Corum and Hassan Haskins as they should have. Both of them topped 100 yards rushing once again. They both, carries were about split. And they're very productive. This is something we've seen, before, obviously, early in the year. And they leaned on it. I don't blame them. It was, part of the game plan. And as I said, you're going to see it, moving forward, too, against some of these other Big Ten schools, too.
Well, Cade McNamara was 20 of 27 on Saturday. Did not turn the ball over again, but he missed, maybe 1 downfield shot. He took 4 downfield shots. 1 was a little bit off. The other 3, no separation from the receivers. So I thought, all in all, another very solid effort from Cade, wasn't it?
Yeah, I do. He was, I think, fine. They asked him to play a certain way, as we've seen all season long, and he did. Like you said, he was turnover free. They were able to move the football early on. And those red zone struggles weren't necessarily his fault. I mean, the fumble wasn't his fault. The decision to kick the field goal instead of go for it on 4th down weren't his fault. So, I think some of the criticism of him, has been, unwarranted. And you hit a good point. It's something that folks really don't want to talk about or hear about. But you're right. The receivers have been it's been up and down with them all year. I really think that losing Ronnie Bell week 1 has hurt them. They lost their primary downfield threat, their guy that could kind of get those big yard plays, get separation. And it seems like, every game, and it was another case on Saturday, Michigan obviously had to rely on a multitude of receivers, but no one really has stepped up to be that guy just yet. They've kind of had to rely on the tight ends quite a bit. Cornelius Johnson, the guy I thought maybe, would step up and be that number 1 guy. He had 3 catches on Saturday, but he had 7 targets. So, yeah, Cade was fine. He did what he was asked. He completed the short intermediate throws as needed. He did the job. I think he's been just fine.
A lot of the media has been taking shots at him, no doubt about it. Not so much Michigan media, but others. I thought it was interesting after the game. Pat Fitzgerald said he thought Cade just doesn't get enough credit for what he's done this year. He said he moves the sticks, he protects the ball well, and he takes what the defense gives him. He said he sees the field, and I agree with Coach. A large portion of our fan base, though, doesn't give the guy much credit, do they?
No, and that's kind of been the case since I've been on this beat since 2017, and it seems like every year, no matter how successful or unsuccessful Michigan's been, folks clamor for the backup. I mean, I can remember a couple of years ago when I think it was 2018, 2019, when Michigan was playing well with Shea Patterson, and he'd have a bad game, and they'd all want to see Dylan McCaffrey. I think it's a never-ending cycle. I don't think the fan base will be happy regardless of who's in there. But yeah, there is obviously a want to see JT McCarthy. He obviously adds another dimension to Michigan's offense. But when the old saying goes, if it's not broke, don't fix it. And I think Cade's done just everything the coaching staff have asked. The big point about him not turning the ball over has been key. He's an experienced key veteran in there. He's a leader that I think his teammates respect. And at the end of the day, I mean, this team is 7-0. They're 7-0. The offense is still moving the football. They're scoring points. They've scored first in every game this year. They're doing everything right. So at this point, it bewilders me that there's just so much, criticism of Cade.
Some of our fans say, well, it's time to get JJ more playing time so that we can throw the ball. But you know what? You get into week 8, that sends a bad sign to the team and to everyone else when you decide we're going to change directions. It's just not smart.
No, and look, if you look at Jim's his trajectory or his history as a coach in the college game, he's very reluctant to play true freshman quarterbacks. Now, I don't know if I think that's a decision from him. He wants to bring them along slowly, and that's what you're seeing with JJ. I mean, they're playing him in certain situations. They're utilizing his legs, in read option situations. Something Cade will fully admit. He's not the fastest guy in the world. He doesn't have the mobility that JJ does. But I think they're complementing each other well. I think the way that Jim and Josh Gans are utilizing both quarterbacks actually is a good thing, because when they do throw JJ in there at times, it keeps the defense honest. They don't know what they're going to get, because obviously everyone knows JJ has an arm, but he could also run. So I think the way they're utilizing is fine. I think they're going to continue to utilize JJ in that situation. But to anyone who thinks I think a quarterback change is coming or should be coming, I don't see it happening anytime soon.
No, amen to that. The offensive line did a really nice job opening what were truck holes for the backs, and they protected Cade well. And they were down 2 starters. We really need to give the guys up front, I think, more credit. This is turning into a darned good offensive line, isn't it, Aaron?
Yeah, it was a group I was high on in the beginning of the year. They're an experienced bunch. They've been around a little bit long. They got 2 fifth and sixth-year seniors kind of on that group. So they knew what they were getting. I think Michigan realized they had a strong offensive line going into this year. It's one of the reasons why they've emphasized the run game so much. But yeah, they've handled their business pretty well. Yeah, you mentioned them being down a couple of starters on Saturday. Zach Zinter is probably expected to come back here. Probably they think this week. They didn't lean on Chuck Filiaga and Carson Barnhart. By and large, he did fine. Chuck missed that one on the sack. The safety kind of blitz in from the perimeter, but they handled themselves well. I mean, when you look at the run game, and they're able to rush for almost 300 yards on 50 carries. And have their way with Northwestern's defensive line, I'd give them a passing grade for sure from Saturday.
I think we all continue to be impressed with the play of the defense, Aaron, and you really have to nitpick to find fault with how they played this year, and they just shut Northwestern down, didn't they?
Yeah, I don't know if many folks realize this, but Michigan's defense is now second in the country in points allowed per game, and their yards allowed per game, they're like 10th. So this is kind of what we saw from Don. They're back to where Don Brown had the unit a couple of years ago. They're just kind of going about it a different way. They're not blitzing as much. They're keeping the ball in front of them, in the passing game. They're not giving up those huge explosive plays that we've become kind of so accustomed to seeing. Northwestern did have the long 75-yard touchdown run. It was obviously a blown assignment, but other than that, I'd say Mike McDonald and his staff have done a very good job of adapting and quickly changing things when things go south. And that's been kind of the MO, I think, all year long. They've kept the ball in front of them, as I said. They've that bend, don't break mentality where, they don't give up those huge plays, and they're limiting teams to field goals instead of touchdowns, or forced, in the case Saturday, obviously forced a couple of more turnovers, which has certainly increased the last couple of weeks. I can remember the first 3 or 4 games this year where we were all wondering, well, where were the interceptions? Well, the turnovers are now starting to come. You've got Eden Hutchinson obviously playing well. David Ajabo is a guy who I think is in a way flown under the radar. And he's kind of had, I think in the running, I think should be for most improved player on this team. I mean, he's looked fantastic this year. So I think with the way the different alignments, disguises, and the way they're playing, this defense is certainly the strength, I think, of this Michigan team at this point.
Right, and I would throw special teams in there, too. They deserve some applause. We don't talk about them that much, but the punt and the kick coverage has been very good. It was Saturday. Robbins was booming punts, and Moody continues to be money on field goals and extra points. I mean, he did miss one on Saturday, but he's 14 of 16 this year. You really can't ask much more from your special teams, can you, Aaron?
No, credit Jay Harbaugh. I mean, he's been around the program a few years now. He's obviously still coaching tight ends, but I think he's putting more emphasis on the special teams this year. And he's got an experienced group. I mean, you mentioned Moody. He's been around for a few years. He was alternating kicks last year with Quinn Nordine. Robbins has been around a while. So I think it's a veteran, experienced group. They're playing confidently. And it's certainly, brought value to this Michigan team, where it's given them opportunities to, switch the field position and give them extra possession. So yeah, the special teams deserve credit. It was something Jim Harbaugh praised after the game. He really liked their play. That obviously that punt block from Cornelius Johnson, who they kind of threw in there last minute. But yeah, they're playing really well on that group.
Well, this Saturday's game not only has the usual attention of everyone in this state, but the eyes of the nation will be watching too. It is the biggest game in college football this week. The atmosphere in East Lansing will be absolutely loony, won't it, Aaron?
Yeah, I'm expecting it to be. Social media's already been ablaze in the last few days. The rivalry is certainly there. When both teams are 7-0, ranked in the top 10, I can't think of much more, any more gravatas than this. I mean, it's going to be a kind of, obviously the fans are going to be ready. They're going to be rowdy. They're both sides are going to be energized. Bragging rights are obviously on the line, but there's so much more than that. I mean, as I mentioned, both teams are unbeaten at 7-0. Big Ten title, hopes, hinge, obviously. Both these teams are kind of in the running, obviously, for the college football playoff, and a win will certainly propel the winner.
Well, Mel Tucker has done a really great job of piecing together this team. I think he has 15 portal players on the roster, most of them contributing, and they have been surprisingly good on both sides of the ball. The offense, it's balanced and it's dangerous. This will be another big test for the Michigan defense, won't it, Aaron?
Yeah, and I don't think you could talk about that group without talking about Kenneth Walker, their running back. I mean, we've seen what Blake Corum and Hassan Haskins have done. I mean, Kenneth Walker's been even better. He's been fantastic. I think he's been probably the biggest surprise of the Big Ten so far this year. They've leaned on him a ton. I suspect they'll do the same thing on Saturday. So it's going to be a big test for Michigan's defensive line. I think they've held up relatively well against the run this year, but this certainly is going to be their biggest test. So I'm really curious to see how they deal with it. But yeah, you mentioned the transfers, and that's something Mel Tucker's leaned on quite a bit this year. He brought in a bunch, especially on the defensive side of the ball. A lot of linebackers, a lot of secondary guys. He's made the most out of the transfer portal, and he has shown that you can win with those plug and play guys. Michigan State has been a success story in the Big Ten, probably more so than Michigan this year, just based on where they were and having Tucker's first year last year. So kudos to them. I think these are two relatively even matched teams, just in terms of their strengths and weaknesses and the like. So Saturday is going to be a fascinating game. I think it's going to tell us a lot about we're talking about Michigan. A lot about this Michigan team and how good it really is. Because if you look at their the first 7 games of their schedule, the combined records of their opponents is about 500. Next 5 games are I think I counted 24-11, the combined record for the next 5 opponents. So Michigan's going to learn a lot about themselves Saturday. I think we're going to find out if they're a legitimate Big Ten title contender, or maybe they're just the best of the rest of the Big Ten.
Of the first 7 games, we really have not seen a team, the defense, I should say, has not seen a team that really is balanced and very good throwing the ball and running the football. We're going to see that Saturday. And that secondary, the Michigan secondary, it's been better than I expected, of course. They're playing a lot less man this year, so Mike McDonald is protecting them, trying to shore up some of the weaknesses. But they're going to be tested on Saturday. I think this group of Spartan receivers could be the biggest challenge yet for that secondary, Aaron.
It will be, yeah. And Peyton Thorne, the quarterback, has been playing fantastic this year. He's another guy kind of like Cade who hasn't made a ton of mistakes and been able to find this guy, make the right play. Michigan State is loaded offensively. They got some good receivers. Quarterback's playing well. I'm really curious to see how the secondary handles it. I mentioned the run game, and they're going to obviously probably have to fill the box a little bit there. So I think it's going to create some inopportune situations for Michigan secondary. So how Jamon Green, DJ Turner, and Vince Gray play, will be, I think, important. We saw DJ Turner, extended time on Saturday. He had the interception. So the Michigan's clearly trying to get him more reps and more playing time in preparation for the stretch here. But yeah, Michigan State's going to probably put up some points. They're going to at least try to throw the ball. It's going to be a fascinating test for Michigan's defense because, as you mentioned, they've had some tests here and there. I thought Adrian Martinez was a good example of that. But balanced, as you mentioned, balanced offenses haven't been a consistent threat for Michigan this year. So, we'll see how they fare on Saturday.
Yeah, absolutely. And over on the other side of the ball, the Spartan D has been really good in the trenches, very solid. Their linebacking core, especially Halliday, has been very surprising. But their secondary has been shredded on occasion this year. So I'm sure Gaddis wants to establish the run. It's what Michigan does best, so you want to do that. But we're going to have to throw the ball a little more effectively this week, aren't we?
Yeah, and I think this is going to be an opportunity for K. Mackin. We talked about him earlier in the conversation, and I think this is a real opportunity for him to show out and show that he can be that quarterback that the Michigan fan base can rally around. He's had some good games, like as we talked about. He's been turnover free, but this is a real chance for him to show that he can be that gamer. And look, he hasn't really had to play in that big opportune rivalry game just yet. I mean, remember, he's only had 8 starts in his college career. They're 7-0, but the competition so far, at least the Big Ten, hasn't been great. So this is an opportunity for him to go on the road in a hostile environment at Spartan Stadium and get a win. I can remember talking to Shea Patterson on his way out at Michigan, and to this day, some of his fondest Michigan moments were going into Spartan Stadium and beating Michigan State. So I think this is an opportunity for Cade to be able to say the same thing. Not only get Michigan a win, but show that he can lead this team to a big time victory.
Well, the Spartans are coming off bye week, and something tells me they're going to have some wrinkles to throw at Michigan, Aaron, on both sides of the ball. I'm sure Michigan is going to expect that, though, aren't they?
Yeah, I'm really curious to see how Michigan State comes out Saturday, especially in the first half. We saw the first half from Michigan against Northwestern coming off the bye, and they're a little rusty, as we talked about. And I wonder if that's going to be the case for Michigan State on Saturday. If so, that's an opportunity, obviously, for Michigan to jump on them and score early and get ahead early, which I think is going to be important, especially on the road. So we'll see. They have had an extra week to prepare for Michigan, which I think it certainly should help the Spartans. But I think you can only watch so much tape and do so much preparation before you actually suit up and play the game. Emotions are going to be high, especially early on. It seems like every game, whether it's in East Lansing, Ann Arbor, you hear a lot of back and forth and everything else. So that those first 30 minutes, the first 2 quarters are going to be key, I think, for Michigan. They need to get a lead early and give them an opportunity to go in that second half ahead. And I think that's the best case best path for a win on Saturday.
Well, the last time Michigan and Michigan State met as top 10 opponents was in the 3rd week of the season in 1964 in East Lansing. This is the first time they've met 7-0 going into the game. At that time, Michigan was number 7, Michigan State was number 9, and Michigan won 17-10. So the hype, both locally and nationally, should be off the charts by noon on Saturday.
Yeah, I think it's really shaped up to be probably the best game of the weekend. I know there was this assumption that maybe Ohio State, Penn State would be the college football playoff elimination game. Well, Penn State's coming off that loss to Illinois on Saturday. They've already got 2 losses, so they're pretty much out of it. ESPN and ABC ended up picking up that game and putting it in prime time, where Fox, had the Michigan State game for noon on Saturday. But all eyes are going to be on that game. It's going to be I think the only top 10 matchup of the weekend. It's got, as I mentioned, it's got huge, potential for the Big Ten title race and potential playoff. So it's going to be a huge matchup. It's going to, I think the winner is going to come out on the other side with a real chance to make a run here. And I'm not going to, and I won't say that the loser won't have a chance here, but just from a emotional standpoint, this game is so high and so rabid that it can really change the trajectory of your season. So I'm really curious to see how Saturday plays out, how Michigan looks, how they start early, and how Cade McNamara plays.
Final question for you, Aaron, before we let you get away. Sparty will have the advantage of playing in front of their crazy home crowd, and that's always worth points. It counts for a lot. Do you see this game, though? We talked about this a few minutes ago, how evenly matched these teams are. Do you see this as one that could go right down to the wire?
I do. It seems like every year as they play this game, it's always pretty close going into late stages. I mean, last year even Michigan lost. It was a close game. Last time East Lansing was another close game. They went to the fourth quarter. I certainly think it's going to be a one possession game either way. I haven't had to make a prediction yet. I'm still thinking about it. The Michigan State obviously gets a slight edge because it's at home, but as we've seen, Michigan's won the last two in East Lansing, so they've had no issue going in there and stealing a victory or getting a win. Odds makers released the lines on Sunday. It opened as Michigan opened as a slight 4-point favorite. It's dropped down a little bit to 3.5. I suspect it's probably going to close around 3. Which signals to me the odds makers look at Michigan as about a touchdown favorite on a neutral field. So that I think that folks think Michigan is the better team. Statistically, they probably look like they're slightly the better team. But again, this game's in East Lansing. Home environments do matter, especially in college football. So we will see. I think it's going to be a close one. I think it should be a fun one, and it probably will go down the wire. Yeah.
You hear fans say year after year in a rivalry game, you can, especially Michigan State, that you can throw out the records. It doesn't matter. Hard to do that this year. It's probably never mattered more since 1964. It is going to be interesting, so we'll see on Saturday. Here with us on our Michigan Game Day segment this week has been beat writer Aaron McMann from MLive. Aaron, always a pleasure to have you on the show with us. Thank you for being so gracious with your time, and we look forward to that next visit.
No problem, Mike. Enjoy the game, everyone.
On Quick Hits today, Jim didn't have much to say about injuries at his Monday presser. He hopes to have Zinter and Keegan back, and Roman Wilson should be good to go. He did see some action on Saturday against Northwestern. We'll just have to wait until Saturday to see if any of them are game-time decisions. Also at his presser on Monday, Jim was as intense as I've seen him since his first year on the job. He said Michigan State is playing good ball, and Michigan has to approach this game with an elimination mentality. I think it's safe to say both teams will be ready to rock at noon on Saturday. On this Thursday's Visitors Edition, my guest will be Graham Couch from the Lansing State Journal. He'll share his thoughts on this huge game and get us updated on things from a Spartan perspective. So make sure you join us. That will do it for now. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Have a great Wolverine week, everyone. Until Thursday, take care, and as always, go blue. Thanks for joining us today on The Michigan Man, here on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew. Our listener lines are open 24/7 for your calls at 313-263-4842. That's 313-263-4842. Or email us at themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. That's themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. The Michigan Man Podcast is produced at the studios of Robin Lynn Productions, Allen Park, Michigan, and is not affiliated with the University of Michigan. Go Blue!